This time recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Administrator McCarthy, thank you for your testimony and for being here today. I have a couple topics for sure I'd like to get on the table, and the first one is offshore fracking.
Yes.
As you know, numerous fracks have taken place from offshore platforms in federal waters off the coast of California in recent years. Many of these fracks have been in the sensitive waters of the Santa Barbara Channel, which is in my congressional district. While we know very little about the impacts of onshore fracking, we really know far less about offshore. And that's why I called on the EPA and the Department of the Interior last November to place a moratorium on these offshore activities until a comprehensive environmental review is conducted and considered. I know EPA included new disclosure requirements in its most recent discharge permit for these offshore platforms, and I commend you for taking this important step. But this is the catch right now. Much more is needed, and under this new general permit, operators only need to report the type and amount of chemicals in their wastewater after it's already been discharged into the ocean. As a result, regulators like EPA and the California Coastal Commission cannot review these discharges on a case-by-case basis in anticipation of the fracking happening rather than after the fact. Administrator McCarthy, would you consider modifying this discharge permit to require a case-by-case review of these fracking discharges?
Well, the general permit that we issued under the law allows us to reconsider that and take a look at new data. We're more than happy to work with you. We think that the general permit that we put out was a sensible approach given the authority that we have under the law. It also requires that there's certain standards that are achieved in this effluent that's emitted that may contain hydrofracking, that is appropriately tested to ensure that it doesn't damage aquatic life. But if you have concerns, we're always available to sit down and talk through those. And if changes are necessary, the law allows changes to be made.
Great, and I do look forward to that. I think such a modification would be important, and look forward to continued discussion on that topic. Here is another topic. Climate change, as you know, is already having serious impacts on our environment, on our infrastructure, and on our public health. Representing a coastal district, as I do, I'm particularly concerned by one of climate change's lesser understood impacts, ocean acidification.
Yes.
The coastal communities in my district depend on healthy oceans and coastal ecosystems for their livelihoods, for recreation, and much more. So changing ocean chemistry, particularly in the coastal zone where much of this economic activity takes place, has a direct impact on my constituents. The just released IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on climate change, highlighted several factors, including runoff and other pollution, that are magnifying the impacts of ocean acidification at the local level. What is EPA doing to identify coastal areas that are of particular risk for ocean acidification? And if you can, tell us what is being done or can be done to help make these communities more resilient going forward.
Yeah. I think one of the most important messages from the recent IPCC, other than the increasing certainty around the science, it was the highlighting of ocean acidification as a clear concern. And we have across the U.S. government a number of agencies who are on point to look at that issue, most notably NOAA, who has expertise in others, and we're working across the federal government at understanding the science and its implications. On the resiliency side, every agency has developed an adaptation plan. We also have resiliency task force that's looking at this from a national level. We need to make sure that our communities at risk understand that risk, are prepared to act when risk happens, and that also that we're looking at the designs that we can put into our infrastructure that prevent water from creating the same kind of concerns that we have seen in the past. Mm-hmm. So we're working to mitigate carbon emissions. We're looking at also addressing hand in hand with communities how we can keep them safe in the face of a changing climate.
Do you see pieces of the President's budget allowing for this? And also, you're nodding, so I'll take that as an answer, but also say to our chairman, in conclusion, that a hearing on climate change adaptation and resiliency, or an aspect of that, I think would be most appropriate for this committee, because these federal agencies, as the administrator has just said, are going ahead and working on it. I think we need to be apprised, but also there might be a role that we would want to play working with you. And I yield back the balance of my.
The lady yields back.